Welcome to today's Explainer. We're not just looking at your standard political event today. No, we're going to untangle what is, honestly, a meticulously planned, high-stakes constitutional thriller. We're breaking down the incredibly complex removal of Article 370 of the Indian Constitution. It's a massive story, part history, part legal loopholes, and basically a perfectly executed multi-year strategy. Let's get right into it.
So, let's start with a paradox. How exactly do you remove a law that is legally impossible to remove? Because that is the central puzzle of this whole explainer. For literally decades, legal experts and politicians alike looked at this specific law and thought it was an unbreakable lock, a literal constitutional catch-22. To understand how that lock was eventually picked, we actually have to rewind to the crazy events that unfolded over just a few incredibly tense days.
Let's flash back to early August 2019. Things moved fast. Out of nowhere, the famous Amarnath Yatra pilgrimage was abruptly halted. Tourists, they were issued strict advisories to evacuate the Kashmir Valley right away. Fast forward to the night of August 4th, and local political leaders were suddenly placed under house arrest, while Section 144, which bans public gatherings, was slapped into place overnight. And behind closed doors, while there was a secret midnight meeting at the president's house led by the prime minister. The stage was absolutely set. But, to really understand this heist, we first need to figure out exactly how the vault was built in the first place.
Part 1. The Vault, 1947, and the Princely Puzzle.
Okay, so before independence, the map of India was basically split down the middle into two distinct parts. You had British India, which was ruled directly by the British. But then you had the princely states, and there were about 565 of these. They were ruled by local kings or nizams who handled their own internal affairs, while the British took care of the big stuff: defense, foreign affairs, and communications. Now, when the Mountbatten Plan announced the partition into India and Pakistan, these 565 princely states were handed a massive choice. They could join India, they could join Pakistan, or they could choose to remain entirely independent.
And that choice? It triggered an absolute crisis for Jammu and Kashmir. See, the state had a Hindu king, Raja Hari Singh, but a heavily Muslim-majority population. Initially, the king really just wanted to stay independent. He even signed a standstill agreement with Pakistan to keep trade lines open, but firmly refused to join either new nation. However, things escalated quickly. In October 1947, Pakistan sent unofficial proxy fighters to attack and claim Kashmir. With hostile forces moving rapidly towards Srinagar, the king realized his newly independent state was on the brink of falling. Completely out of desperation, on October 26, 1947, he reached out to India for military backup, officially signing a very important document called the Instrument of Accession.
Now, this was absolutely not a standard merger. Under this agreement, India was only granted jurisdiction over three very specific things: defense, foreign affairs, and communication. That's it. Everything else, we're talking internal administration, drafting their own constitution, creating independent local laws, all of that remained strictly under the autonomy of Jammu and Kashmir.
So the big question was, how on earth do you fit a state with that much autonomy into the broader constitution of a newly independent India? That brings us to part 2, the unbreakable lock, Article 370.
The solution they came up with was Article 370. Drafted by Gopalaswamy Iyengar, this was really just meant to be a temporary bridge. It legally codified those unique terms of the accession we just talked about, making sure the Indian Constitution wouldn't fully apply to Jammu and Kashmir without the explicit consent of the state's own government. In fact, it was specifically placed in Part 21 of the Indian Constitution, which is the section dedicated solely to temporary provisions.
But here is where we slam into the ultimate constitutional roadblock. Article 370 actually came with its own self-destruct mechanism, but it had a huge flaw. The rule was that the President of India could only remove the law with the explicit approval of the Jammu and Kashmir Constituent Assembly. So what's the problem? Well, the legal reality is that this specific Constituent Assembly finished drafting the state's local constitution and permanently dissolved back in 1957. Literally, the one body required to unlock the law ceased to exist. It essentially turned this temporary bridge into a permanent, ironclad fixture.
In building on that massive autonomy, they added another layer. Through the Delhi Agreement and a later 1954 presidential order, Article 35A was brought into the mix. Derived from an old 1927 law instituted by the former king, this new addition prevented non-locals from buying land or getting government jobs in the state. And look,
While local citizens celebrated this as a crucial protection of their demographics, it created a system heavily criticized by others across India as a form of dual citizenship that discriminated against non-Kashmiris. This single addition fueled decades of absolutely fierce political debate.
So how do you bypass a missing key? Well, you spend years subtly changing the locks. Part 3, the 5-year master plan, 2014 to 2018. Over the next 4 years, we watch an incredibly meticulous political chess match unfold. In late 2014, the BJP, which was a party that explicitly promised to remove Article 370 in its manifesto, wins an unprecedented 25 seats in the state elections. Fast forward to March 2015, and they form this highly surprising coalition government with the PDP, a party with a fundamentally opposite ideology. And they actually run the government together for over 3 years. But then, in June 2018, the BJP abruptly pulls their support, completely intentionally causing the state government to collapse.
What happened next is details straight out of a Hollywood script. With the government completely collapsed, the opposition parties frantically scrambled, trying to put their differences aside to form a unity government. On November 21, 2018, they tried to send their official claim to the governor. But, as coincidences go, the governor's fax machine was supposedly broken that day. Seriously. The claim never officially went through, and the window to form a new local government just slipped away. And that perfectly timed broken fax machine allowed the legal dominoes to just keep falling. Step 1. The government collapse immediately triggers governor's rule, placing the centrally appointed Satyapal Malik in charge. Step 2. Under the law, if a government isn't formed for exactly 6 months, which hit precisely on December 20, 2018, President's rule is officially enacted. Step 3. Once President's rule was active, the President issued a special notification that fundamentally altered exactly who held the power in Jammu and Kashmir. This was the ultimate power shift. Before this, the local state government and state assembly called the shots, but under the new rules of this specific presidential notification, the centrally appointed governor was legally recognized as the state government itself. And even bigger, the Indian parliament was legally authorized to act as the state assembly. The central government essentially held all the cards now.
The board is now perfectly set. Part 4, the final move, August 5th, 2019. Let's look at exactly how they picked that unbreakable lock using a brilliant legal loophole. Remember, India absolutely needed the Constitutional Assembly to approve the removal, but it had vanished in 1957. So they utilized a totally separate provision, Article 367, which deals with legal interpretations, to completely redefine the phrase Constitutional Assembly to mean Legislative Assembly. And because the state was under President's rule, the Indian Parliament was currently acting as that Legislative Assembly. Which means, yep, Parliament essentially just granted itself the permission that was legally required.
On the morning of August 5th, the president drops a new order. It began with this profound phrase, with the concurrence of the government of state of Jammu and Kashmir. But think about it. Because there were 0 local elected officials at the time, that required legal concurrence was provided directly by the governor, a guy appointed by the central government. In one move, they had legally entirely bypassed that 1957 Catch-22.
Immediately following this, Home Minister Amit Shah steps into the Rajya Sabha, and a leaked photo of his documents showed exactly how intensely planned this entire operation was, coordinating security, troop movements, and the legal maneuvers down to the minute. He proposes a resolution to render all clauses of Article 370 inoperative. Just like that, the entire Indian constitution would now apply to J&K with 0 exceptions, which simultaneously eradicated Article 35A. The resolution was swiftly passed by massive majorities in both houses of parliament. The historic, unbreakable law was officially completely dismantled.
Which brings us to a final thought today. Whether you view this whole event as a long overdue, necessary integration, or a deeply controversial maneuver, the sheer mechanical, step-by-step precision of this constitutional heist is just undeniable. So consider this. Will this meticulous legal blueprint, this method of redefining terms and fully leveraging President's rule, redefine how immense constitutional roadblocks are handled in the future? It's a really fascinating question to leave you with. Thanks for diving into this explainer with us, and keep exploring the complexities of our world.